Stiles and Watkins, Nunes and Cartoscelli, and Nunes. The first Kings Roundtable of the ceiling, and boy, oh boy, there is a lot to discuss. Fellas, how you doing? I was saying this is my first time seeing Frankie without a bag over his head since the Yankees lost.
I really don't want to start the show like this today. Can we please not start the show like this today?
I'm kidding. Frankie Cartoscelli, Brenden Nunes. How are you guys doing?
Doing all right. Yeah, nothing too crazy on my end. Probably better than Frankie's been recently, but that's about it.
Why do we have to do this every time? Because
we don't do it every time.
No, because it was the worst the worst inning of a World Series of all time. I have to
I didn't say that
forever.
You said that.
It's like I'm the only New York Yankees fan in Sacramento.
You and Jason.
I guess so, man.
Yeah, but Jason doesn't react. We're very similar, Frankie.
Jason's an optimist, and I appreciate that about him. And he always it comes at it with like the nice angle, and I'm always just pessimistic, and I'm a doomsdayer. I think with a lot of my sports teams.
We bring the doom.
Boomsdayer.
Walked into that one.
Yes, yes, you did.
Yeah, between the Yankees getting destroyed in the World Series and for some reason being attributed to the Costco guys, it's been a pretty rough start of a season for me. Outside of the Kings playing pretty well.
Yeah, well, look, let's turn that frown upside down, and that's exactly what the Kings did last night for a lot of Kings fans. 122-107. I mean, guys, we were both in the post game while Chris was doing his outstanding YouTube post game. Go check that out if you haven't checked it out before for all the home games. But the story of the game was Keegan Murray and Keegan Murray's growth and his development. Let's get to Keegan Murray and then we'll break down DeMar DeRozan. But Keegan Murray was a guy who a lot of the write-ups that we saw, it was, is this going to hurt Keegan Murray's growth and his timeline? I think it might have changed it, but I believe both of you have been in the same category as Chris and I as far as this is what we thought Keegan was going to be. Keegan was never going to boogie on people and be people bringing up Jason Tatum and I know the Kawhi Leonard comparison comes out, but this is who we thought Keegan was going to be, and he's going to continue to get better doing these things. I think internally we knew this. National media wasn't really sure what to make of him, but what are your first thoughts on Keegan's development in year 3?
Yeah, I mean, I think that looking at what he did in college, I mean, those expectations, I don't think were ever really, I mean, I don't know about personally how you guys feel, but myself, I didn't look at him as a guy that was going to be a slashing scorer type, like a DeMar DeRozan type. It's someone who, in his first year, I think he fit that mold pretty well of being a spot-up shooter, and the defense wasn't really there. Last year took a step forward on the defensive end. I think that anything above that this year would have been a positive, and through 8 games, he's been hitting the glass at a much higher level. I think he's at, 7.5, 8 rebounds per game right now, 8.3 rebounds per game, which is crazy to see him post the double-doubles to begin the year. Seeing him not shy away from his opportunities to score the basketball, really continue to show growth, is a self-creator. Those are things that you look for as a guy who's in his 3rd year and can, the Kings want to build around him. But I think him becoming, like you said, a Tatum or Booker, Brandon Ingram, something like that, I don't look at him really in that regard. I think that what he is right now, I don't think he's reached his ceiling yet, but the type of player that he is, I mean, I think OG Anunoby is someone that we talked about for years, the Kings looking to. Could he be someone that could be maybe not as great as a defender as OG is, but have enough of an offensive bag and be a strong defender? I mean, the rebounds help too, but I think right now you're seeing that Keegan Murray is proving that he's going to deserve that pretty big extension that's coming up for him.
He could be a diet Kawhi. I would entertain that. I'm not saying he's going to be Kawhi Leonard, but I could see a diet Kawhi. I mean, Mike Brown yesterday in the post game, somebody asked the question, "Hey, would you play Keegan, or do you really feel like you can play Keegan 2, 3, and 4?" And Mike Brown, I know he said it, I think it was half jokingly, he said, we might play him at the 5. The only place we know we're not going to play him is at the 1. So that versatility is crazy. But Brenden, your thoughts, early returns on Mr. Murray?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you mentioned it, they were speaking so glowingly of him yesterday, and even the joking, like, we're not going to play him at the 1. Shooting guard Steph Curry sometimes. He kind of does play the 1. He does a little bit of everything. And I think that anything asked, he also seems to pick up. One of the big points of emphasis this offseason was offensive rebounding, and he's the only person where I've actually noticed it. I don't know about you guys. Like, Domantas Sabonis just does that. Sure. That's part of his game. But Keegan's averaging almost 3 offensive rebounds a game, which is ridiculous. And obviously we're still very early. But I think he's doing everything there. And the whole was DeMar going to get in his way thing. I think that this was it was before DeMar got there and after DeMar. It didn't change what Keegan needed to do. Yeah. I think it was always an internal thing, and kind of thought that the X factor was just, is he going to be able to or want to recognize his own moments and try to capitalize them? And I think that he's been more aggressive, and we've seen DeMar enable previous teammates. I mean, I thought even just how excited he got for Sabonis after that game winner, or makes me think back to Kobe White hitting game winners next to him and how excited he looked for that, you know? So I think DeMar's enabling, but really Keegan had to go and take it. And I think he's been doing that.
Yeah, Frankie, and I want to toss this to you because you and I have both been watching the Kings for as long as we can remember. And I think a thing that's been a common through line with more so Kings young players is that they haven't really been great at like developing young guys. You don't really see like the year-to-year progression. It feels more, I mean, a lot of the time it's because there wasn't much to to work from. But I think the one thing that we've seen pretty consistently with Mike Brown and his staff in total is that they do really emphasize player development. I mean, we've seen Doug Christie and Barbosa train with Sabonis, and we see, I mean, he's shooting 50% from three right now on 2 attempts a game. And then, Keegan Murray, his offensive rebounding growth, largely because Mike Brown / Monty McNair really enabled them to have the power to crash the offensive glass at the rate that Keegan is. Just in general, I mean, what have you really noticed from the player development side this year? Who's taken some leaps in some specific areas that you've noticed?
I mean,
it could just be those two.
Well, I mean, those two to begin with, but I think just kind of to start, I would say that the difference between this year, even last year's Kings team compared to the ones that we grew up watching, a lot of people watched over the years, the stability of a coaching staff, I think, is super important. Yeah. And I think DeMarcus Cousins has said it a lot in interviews that he played here for, I think, 7-8 years and had 6 or 7 head coaches.
He had 3 in 1 year, right?
Yeah. I mean, just a revolving door of head coaches that bring in a new idea or new schemes or new ideas for certain players, what they want them to do, what avenues they want these players to kind of fit for their respective teams. But I mean, Mike Brown and this coaching staff, there are some staples that know what each player should be doing, what their job should be. And Keegan Murray is someone I think that we're seeing, like you mentioned, Doug Christie, one of the best defenders in this franchise's history, an all defensive, player multiple times in his career. Barbosa, who was a headache on defense too during his career. Those are great guys to learn from. And that's not to say there wasn't players in the past that weren't learning from current player coaches. Like Bobby Jackson was around for a long time. Right. So no knock on them, but the fact that you're playing under a coach in Mike Brown who has won at the highest level. He's been head coach of some of the best players that the game of basketball has ever seen. Period. I mean, seeing the growth there, I don't think it's coincidence. I mean, Keegan Murray, De'Aaron Fox, even working on his jumper. I mean, Luke Laux obviously was working with him a lot more in that regard. But down the line, really, Keon Ellis, someone who was undrafted, and he's worked his way, sure, from his own skill, but also you have to learn and kind of soak in what you get at this level. And we're seeing all these players here, 1 through 6 or 7, they're becoming better basketball players by being a member of the Sacramento Kings. I don't think that's something you could have said 2 years ago. So Keegan is someone I look to as it's exciting, but Mike said it last night, the sky's the limit. I think we are seeing Keegan scratch the surface, and could he become a perennial all-star? I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, we know how political all-star games can be, and he's nowhere near that close yet. De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis didn't make it last year, and they were incredible. But he is someone that doesn't look to me like you see players like, not a bust, obviously, but the Josh Jackson types that get drafted, those wings that don't really ever pan out. Keegan Murray, if this was his ceiling right now, he is a player who can play in the NBA for a very long time, and I think he's going to be much, much, much better than that.
Early impressions on DeMar's impact, and as positive as we have been so far, is the bench a problem? Let's discuss. Roundtable, Stiles and Watkins, Sactown Sports. Roundtable or Guitar Hero if you're tuning in right now. This sounds like it would be a hard one. Frankie Cartoscelli, you get down on some Guitar Hero?
I'm honestly very good at Guitar Hero.
Yeah, that tracks.
Before your wrist.
Frankie. I can battle. I mean, my right wrist is good.
We got to start a rock band set up here. Get the drums going.
I'm down for the drums.
Anybody
Are you a drummer?
drummer?
I'll do the drums.
Dude, I love Guitar Hero.
I would love to play.
I'll be the singer.
I guess that. I definitely guess that.
Can you sing? Can you sing?
I can get it done. I was in concert choir.
Were you really?
Oh, yeah, he was. Yep. He brought him down a whole octave.
D1 Temple Star Baseball, and also
extracurriculars,
choir.
man, they matter.
So take a good look.
All right, I'll get an Xbox 360 in here.
All right, let's get back into some action here, guys. We discussed Keegan before the break. Now, I really want to get into the early impressions on DeMar, but I just think it's going to go fairly quickly because it's just been great. It's just been great. But Brenden, has this exceeded your expectations? Is this what you thought it would look like? Is it better than what you thought it looked like? Do you think it would look even better? Your first impressions on DeMar, and let's take it a step further and kind of discuss the new version of this Kings offense as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's going to come with more mid-ranges, but I think that DeMar, you almost see it similar with in Minnesota, where they said Julius Randle actually is going to create even more threes for us, even though obviously he shoots way less than Cat did. I think that DeMar does create more threes for his teammates, but obviously he's going to have that mid-range. I mean, it's just, I just have a lot of moments where I'm like, that's really DeMar DeRozan out there. And because he just casually does whatever he wants, there was that stretch in Toronto where he scored all 8 points in overtime. He had a stretch, I want to say it was last night as well, where he walks into a easy midi, looks easy for him at least. Yeah. And then he does this ridiculous pass and then hits a and one for a 4-point play. And it's just there's stretches, I feel like, and runs that he goes on completely by himself. Yeah. And it seems like there's nothing anybody could do about it. So I think that he's fit in well. I do think it's a credit to Mike Brown and how he's integrated these guys. But the 52% from the field and 38% from three, even on low volume, isn't going to last, to be honest. But I kind of think that everything else is, and just those numbers will regress back down to the norm a bit, but he's just being DeMar DeRozan when it comes down to it, doing whatever he wants on offense, it feels like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when the move happened, we kind of looked at it as, obviously it's HB's minutes that he's moving into, and it's not a knock against HB, but I mean, it really is night and day, the production that you see out of that spot. And it's, like you mentioned, the tough shot making, the times where the Kings are in a scoring lull or things are kind of stagnant, he's able to go and demand the attention of the opposing defenses, and he can get to the basket, whether it's drawing a foul. He's a master at getting to the foul line and a great free throw shooter. The Kings, I think, are still number one in the NBA in free throw shooting percentage. And he obviously is a huge reason behind that. He's shooting almost 90% from the free throw line.
A merchant.
Is he a free throw merchant?
Definitely.
He is.
Dude, Friday with James Harden and DeMar DeRozan is going to, that game
break rims.
It might be a 4-hour game. But just like you said, it's pretty to the point. I mean, he is an incredible player. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame someday. And I think it just kind of, with each passing game, I think Kings fans or those that are watching the team are kind of seeing more and more how valuable he is and how just really meaningful of a move it was that the Kings signed him. He chose to come here. He could have gone somewhere else. Like Chris and I were talking about it the other day, that I think he has enough money for the rest of his life already. I think that one thing he doesn't have is a ring. And I'm not saying the Sacramento Kings are going to win the NBA Finals because of DeMar DeRozan, but he could have. He could have joined the Heat. Yeah. He could have joined, the Lakers or the Clippers or back home. He could have gone somewhere else where he had a better chance of being at the forefront of a title chase. But he came here where there is a lot of talent, a lot of young talent, and clearly, even at 35 years old, we're kind of seeing that old NBA trope of once you're about 33, 34, your career is over. I mean, he doesn't look like he's slowing down at all.
No, and he's a name, Chris, and I'll throw it to you right after this. He's a name where we talk about the Stephs and we talk about the LeBrons and the longevity of the game and how the game is changing. He's more in the conversation. I would put him in the conversation with the Chris Pauls, and be honest with you, I haven't watched a ton of Spurs basketball, but even watching Chris Paul last season with the Warriors, he's one of those places where he doesn't get talked about, right? He's a little bit younger than those guys, so he doesn't get talked about the same way, but he's kind of keeping that mantle up as well. I mean, his production hasn't changed at all. So, yeah, nobody really thinks about DeMar DeRozan when we talk about the longevity of the game, but I think what he's doing this season, they're going to start to, because they're going to have to.
Yeah, and I mean, just to continue on the DeMar front and the free throw front as well. I mean, what are the exact parts of, because we've talked about it before, and what are the exact parts of DeMar's game where you guys feel like, okay, more so where you say this is the reason why DeMar is on this team, like him going to the free throw line, him maybe stopping a run or something like that. Have there been moments, and what do you feel like are the moments where you specifically are really looking to say, yes, maybe, I think the 4-point play the other night is the extreme example of, okay, that just doesn't happen last year. The Kings just lose that game last year because they don't have anyone besides De'Aaron Fox who probably is willing to take that shot. What have just been the moments, or what are going to be the moments that you guys look for where you're like, okay, this is a moment right here where DeMar DeRozan earns his money, or Monty McNair is vindicated in bringing DeMar here?
I definitely think clutch moments. I mean, obviously they already had De'Aaron for that reason, but I think the composed nature that he has, and having multiple options, is just always a good thing.
Yep.
It's not like the there being one ball thing is an issue, I think.
Right.
I think it's also just about having less lulls and less slow nights in general. You have something to fall back on. Again, I think he's extremely consistent. He scored 20 in every game that he's played with the Kings so far, and for however many years in his career as well. This is what he does. And you can survive a slow De'Aaron Fox night more. That night, right. De'Aaron goes 0 of 11 from 3. They lose the game in overtime.
That's an L.
They lose in overtime. That was a close game because DeMar DeRozan scored every single point in overtime. Yep. So I think he just keeps them in games, and there should be less moments when you combine him with Keegan Steph, with Malik and De'Aaron and Domas, of slow nights where you're losing to the Pistons,
Yeah, the spurts are just a little bit different because obviously De'Aaron, clutch player of the year a couple years ago, but the way De'Aaron does it, it feels more streaky than DeRozan. DeRozan, you just know that you can always fall back on it. And if he's missing, I mean, that thing is just, it's hitting every part of the rim and it's going out. It just always feels like he's right there. Whereas with De'Aaron, it feels like are we getting De'Aaron on a good night or are we not? With DeMar DeRozan, we have it even on his quote unquote bad nights. They're still pretty darn good. So I think that's a huge part of it. All right, guys, let's switch gears here. I know we've been super positive, but to the other side of it, is the bench a problem? All right. And the bench is the third worst scoring bench in the league. And that sounds like a problem to me. Last night, you look at some of the numbers, and we're going to get into Malik Monk on the other side as well. Malik, 13 points, 1 of 4 from 3-point range. Trey Lyles, 0 points, 11 minutes. He only took 1 shot. Frankie, look, man, you were in the post game with me. Domantas Sabonis was most excited about playing 33 minutes. He didn't care about anything else. He didn't care about his perfect triple-double. He cared about the fact that they only played 33 minutes. Is this bench a problem?
I mean, in the long term, yes. I think if you're looking at it from a one game, like game by game situation, no. I mean, because the Kings have a very strong starting 5 and even a strong 6-7. But to your point, it's game 8 of 82, and you hope there's more than that. And to that, yeah, they're going to have to make some kind of move here. And I was talking with Whitey and Draper yesterday about stop. No, the trade machine will not be broken out now. But I think we all can agree that the roster that is currently in play right now, there's going to be something that's different. I don't think it's going to be a drastic starting lineup change. I mean, you never know. But I think shoring up the depth would be an ideal scenario for Mike Brown and Monty McNair to get in a room and kind of come together and say, okay, what can we do to upgrade this roster? Because right now, the Kings have 4 players in the top 11 in minutes per game in the NBA right now. No other team has more than 1 player in there. So that's just you're riding these guys. You're just letting them play almost 40 minutes per night. That's not sustainable. So I don't know when that's going to get figured out, but I think early in the season, they're winning games, and even the games they're losing, they're not terrible losses. I think they've combined their 3 losses are by a combined 9 points. So they're right there. They just need a little bit more depth, and or they can give your guy Dougie McBuckets a little more run. I mean, he's there waiting.
Brenden, I'm going to let you answer in a second, but I want to provide some important context. Kings offense, Kings bench is dead last in the NBA in offensive rating, but they are 3rd in the NBA as a bench unit in defensive rating. So,
well, I hope you're good at something, because it's
exactly
not
that's
scoring,
more what I'm saying. It's just yes, they are very bad at offense, but at least they bring something to the table.
The bench is bad, and I don't really know what 2 ways about it. Yeah. They don't have much of a bench, but I think that's the reality of, in the background here, we have Philly and Phoenix playing, and I think some older game, but any team that has a big 3 does not have good depth. These teams do not have good depth. And actually the Kings, you go 7-8 deep of really, really good players, but after that, it just falls off a cliff. And I think that is the nature of roster building. and how this works in the modern NBA when you have these stars. But what we mentioned with DeMar earlier and how he kind of allows some of these other guys to have off nights, you still have enough optionality within the guys that do play on a night-to-night basis that I think you can survive some lulls. But it's kind of just the reality of this team. These guys are going to play a lot. They have to. When they all play together, it goes really well. Their net rating with their starting group, or if you throw Malik in there, has been great to start this season. I think it's kind of just the reality of this team is that you don't have much depth. It's something that you could try to address at the deadline. But as of right now, that's where we're at. To me, it's really Malik Monk and Keon Ellis are the only two guys off the bench. Like Alex Len, I think, is fine in an okay role. And Trey Lyles just has not been good to start the year. I don't feel like there's really another way to say it. And he has been injured. He started this season, didn't go through training camp and preseason and things like that. So I'm willing to give it a little bit of a pass. But to me, the bench is really just Malik and Keon. Yeah,
it's a good shout, Brenden, on this big three, on the big three conversation. And I think we consider the Kings a big three, a more balanced big three. So what I did was I looked up the Phoenix Suns, and the last game they played was against a team that it was the Heat. So Kevin Durant played 39 minutes against the Heat, and they battled back and forth. We just saw what the Kings did against the Heat. So then I went back 2 more games to see what the Suns did against the Blazers, because everyone's talking about the Suns are 7-1. Okay, so they beat the Blazers 103-97. Kevin Durant, 38 minutes.
Right.
All right. Bradley Beal, 34 minutes. Devin Booker, 36 minutes. And then you look at their bench, they did play more guys, but you got Royce O'Neal with 3 points and Grayson Allen, who is essentially their Malik Monk, 18 points. So maybe this isn't as unique to the Kings as maybe it feels, or maybe I'm making it out to be, because on the surface it feels bad. But if you look, the Warriors, they've been doing a good job with their scoring. But if you look at some of these teams out here and their big threes, this is they scored 21 points against this Blazers team, the Suns did, and it was 3 from Royce O'Neal and 18 from Grayson Allen. So maybe that's just how it looked for a lot of these teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the model of having the big three, and these are all guys that have all NBA experience and or all-star nods, and I think you'll find that all along the way. But I think, like I mentioned, everyone playing nearly 40 minutes a night is not sustainable. And if they're going to play a whole 82 game season or longer, they got to find some way to mix it in.
Get back to Frankie on the other side here, and it leads to Malik Monk's fit with DeMar DeRozan and the crew as Malik decided to stay here in Sacramento. More Roundtable when we return. Stiles Watkins, Sactown Sports.
This is Sactown Sports.
Let's start with Frankie Cartoscelli here.
Are we staying on the negative stuff?
No!
They've won 5 of 6.
That's right!
Oh, the bench is bad. The bench is bad.
Is it good?
They won 5 of 6.
Yeah. You need to chill out. Stiles and Watkins, Sactown Sports. Oh my gosh.
I really can't do it anymore. I can't.
Mm-hmm. Frankie's the one bringing the boom, not me. All right, Stiles and Watkins, Kings Roundtable. This question is from Nick, not me. Okay. From the 916, does it seem like Malik is the most affected by the acquisition of DeMar? This was a question that we had. I think I talked more about Malik than Keegan Murray as far as how things would fit, specifically towards the end of the game. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I know at one point they were running essentially the starters with Keon instead of Kevin Huerter or Malik Monk. Just with the whole there's only one basketball conversation, I wouldn't say are you worried about Malik Monk yet, but does it seem like it's taken him a little bit to kind of find his way?
Yeah, I mean, it's the early excuse is always there, right? But also the fact that this is a very new look offense that is taking the ball out of everyone's hands a little bit more, because DeMar DeRozan is a lot more ball dominant. I mean, again, you're filling those Harrison Barnes minutes, who I can't remember any time Harrison Barnes was the focal point of the offense.
Yeah.
I mean, DeMar DeRozan's bringing the ball down in certain sets. He's getting the ball at the top of the key. He's working on the sideline. Like he's really kind of the orchestrator of the offense at this point, along with Domantas Sabonis. De'Aaron Fox has his moments, but Malik's kind of had to take a step back there. Now, Malik's going to have his moments. He's going to have his nights where he's a microwave scoring 25, 30 points. But I think that we could see his assist numbers dip a little bit. Last year it was a career high 5 per game. It was really him or Fox last year. Sabonis obviously doing what he does, but from the guards or from anyone that was not Domantas Sabonis or De'Aaron Fox, it was Malik Monk. This year, a little bit different. You have one of the best players, the game is one of the best scorers the game has seen. Someone who isn't a negative distributing the basketball. DeMar was around 5 assists per game last year too. So
yeah, Mike Brown even said that he was a better passer than he had realized once he got into the building.
Yeah, I mean, that just, I think, comes with the territory when you've been playing for 15 plus years. I mean, I think that Malik's gonna have to kind of find out, or find his spots and kind of find not a new niche, but I think that the ball dominance we saw last year is not going to be there this year, and that's not a bad thing. It's just, well, it'll give the opportunity to be a little more of a scorer and not have to worry about setting his teammates up as much. That's going to be taken care of. But Malik's the most valuable from what he brings to the bench as a scorer. Like you said, the bench last night, there was little to no production from them. Malik's got to be that guy. He doesn't have to score 20 plus every night, but he's got to give you his best effort. And last year was 15 points per game, I think. Should have been 6th man of the year. He needs to replicate those numbers in my mind, and maybe that means focusing a little bit less on distributing.
Yeah, I think it's really well said. I think he's in a role where he's now more of a play finisher than a creator. If you just even think about, we're talking about DeMar essentially replacing Harrison Barnes. When Malik is playing next to DeMar DeRozan versus Harrison Barnes, how much he has the ball is going to be way different. And I think that's what we've seen. The assists are the only number that really have slowed down, but field goal attempts, he's just under, it was 12.4 last year. He's 11 this year. Reality is he's just not hitting his threes at a super high rate right now, which I think will come around. Obviously, he's a good shooter overall, but it's going to be a little bit different when you have another ball handler next to you. And I think that Malik has adapted to that role. He's able to do whatever, and maybe it'll affect his 6th man of the year, and maybe Buddy Hield will just never slow down end up taking that one away. But I think that he's fit into this role, and I would be curious his maybe happiness level in all of this, but he's not let on that he feels any type of way about it, this or anything. And
he asked for this. He asked for that's why
he chose to come back. Yeah.
From the numbers perspective as well, real quick, the touches per game, Malik last year, 52 touches per game, 30 touches in the front court. This year, down 8 in both of those numbers, 45 touches per game, down from 52, and then down to 22 front court touches per game, down from 30 last year.
Yeah, I think it's a balancing act, because the reason it initially came up, he only had one turnover last night, but Nate was sitting next to me, and as we were watching it, it just felt, I don't know if frantic is the word. I don't want to make too much out of it, but it felt like not that he was pressing, but just felt more frantic than normal. Whereas when Malik knew, it's me, it's De'Aaron, and whoever else has it going that day, hopefully it's Keegan, I'm going to get mine, even though I'm coming off the bench. The pressing that I'm seeing, and maybe I'm focusing too much on it, but the pressing that I'm seeing is because I got to get mine when I'm in, because we got a whole Hall of Famer in here who's, he's going to take shots from people. That's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah, and I think that with, like we talked about, Malik not being as much of a, he's seeing the ball in his hands a little bit less right now. I think like last night, you see him go 4 for 12, combined with De'Aaron Fox last night, 9 of 29. That's rough. But Malik Monk last night, he did seem a little frantic at times. We're all looking at each other saying, he's forcing a little bit. That's going to go back to him and say, okay, yeah, you're going to be able to score a little more and be a finisher. But if you don't have it, maybe revert back into that. You have a strong basketball IQ. You can make the smart pass. We saw it all last year. He's crafty. He's great in the pick and roll. If your offense is not working, don't force. Don't waste possessions. And last night, the Kings did waste a couple possessions. And on some, they benefited because Keegan Murray was a madman on the offensive glass. He was pulling down a couple offensive boards, I think specifically on a couple Malik misses. But it's going to come down to, revert back to that, play style from last year. If it's not working for you, if you're 0 of 7 from 3, sure, take an open shot, but don't force. And last night, we saw Malik force a little bit.
Yeah, that specific play, and Chris had a great kind of explanation to it, but it was the fast break, and it was Malik Monk and De'Aaron, and it was a 2-on-1, and Malik Monk could have thrown the lob. He decided to keep it, and he ended up getting a charge called. And I said to Chris, that's an obvious, De'Aaron Fox is right there. And Chris said, well, that kind of seems like a situation where Malik is overthinking, and it's, well, does he think I'm going to throw the lob, so I'm going to keep it? And I thought it was a kind of a great microcosm of maybe what we're seeing here from Malik in the early goings.
Yeah, I mean, I think that play definitely stood out, and that's one of those moments where you do wonder that a little bit. But again, just to go back to this is the reality of it. Like, the reason he comes off the bench is somewhat to stagger him and De'Aaron. And previously, he's checking in the game, and De'Aaron is not in there for a decent portion of it, and he got to run the show. Yeah. And now that's not the case. I mean, you're seeing Domas's role change as well. I think the reason that he's taking more threes is because he has to create space for DeMar DeRozan. Like, he has had to change his game as well. So I think that, it's just you added a guy that is now 29th all time on the scoring list, and he's going to get his looks. But I think that Malik has accepted the role well.
I'm curious what you guys have thought. Obviously, during the preseason and leading into the start of the season, a lot of the talk is about Kevin Huerter and Keon Ellis and their back and forth. Who's going to be the starter? Who deserves starter? Which team is better, with a team with Kevin Huerter in there or a team with Keon in there? I think so far, especially Kevin returning from injury, he's 11.5 points per game. He's shooting 36% from three, 6 3-point attempts. He's shooting 77% inside the arc. Keon shooting 75% inside the arc as well. What have been your guys' early thoughts on just really those two, but I guess the backstory that goes along with it, the competition between the two, and where you kind of feel like you're at right now?
Yeah, it seemed like there was a lot of noise around Kevin last year, and it seemed like it was a lot of it was mental with him, I think, and that's something I think some people have alluded to even around the team, that I think that it was very hard for him, for someone who's been predominantly a starter for his entire career and in winning situations in the playoffs with Atlanta, Sacramento in the playoffs for the first Beam team year. Just seeing him be more comfortable this year and not be as much of a revolving door on defense, to put it bluntly, I guess. But it seems like he's holding his own on that end. It seems like he's not as much of a liability, and I think that had to happen. That was an absolute had to happen if he wanted to start and keep that spot over Keon Ellis, because we saw how effective the Kings were last year. They were, I think, top 10 in defensive rating the second half of the year. They finished in the second or the upper half of the league at the end of the year when it was all said and done, because of what Keon Ellis brought to that starting unit and what he did in his heightened minutes on the floor. So what Kevin brings to the table, though, is he is one of the best spot-up shooters in the league. He great off DHOs. That's what made the Kings so successful, during their time with Sabonis here, Fox, the Beam team era. Can he be that again? So far, it looks like he has. And Chris and I were joking last night about how he's been automatic in and around the basket. He's been crafty, getting to the rim, which wasn't really in his bag at the beginning of his Kings tenure. So I think he's finding ways to keep defenses on their toes and not just be a player that's going to float on the perimeter, and someone who can, he's 6'7", has a long frame. Can he use it? Can he hold his own on the defensive end? That's going to be the biggest indicator. And can Kevin Huerter keep the spot over Keon Ellis? Because like we've seen, Keon Ellis, since Mike Brown put him back in the rotation, he's the kind of player that contending teams want and that they have. We've seen several teams over the years have a player that can be a 3-and-D, a great on-ball defender, someone who can get in the passing lane. The athleticism is there. I think having someone like that off the bench, if Kevin's producing at a high level, can strengthen that second unit with Malik Monk. But, the Kings did a lot more than that, obviously, but I think right now Kevin's in a good spot.
Defensively, I mean, beginning of last year, or as they sort of winded into the point where he ended up not even being in that starting spot, it was other teams being like, let's go at that guy first play of, it felt like every game. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's been tried at times throughout this season. Yes. And he's done a better job holding his own. Like Frankie said, that's something that needed to happen. I think the inside the arc finishing that you guys highlighted definitely stands out to me, because previously he was like a mid-range guy if it wasn't a three, and now he's getting to the basket more and still finding ways to convert there. So I think he's been great. I think one of the more underrated aspects about him is the pace that he brings both in the full court and the half court for the Kings. And obviously the spacing is what they need, but it probably was mental a lot of last year. And, same thing we could say for the free throws. I'm sure they love that they're not getting asked about it. And I'm sure that Kevin loves that he's not getting asked like, hey, what's going on?
Yeah, and Kevin Huerter, to me, he was choosing his spots, right? I mean, I think it's very specific who he's going to be able to do what he did last night against. But I do think it's a conversation of, you got a second-year player and Grady Dick on you. This is somebody that you can show him a couple things. So go out there and do it, and that's what he did. And I don't think Kevin was really thinking like that last season. And maybe it is because of that. Maybe it's almost an enlightening to these guys having DeMar DeRozan. You can do more than shoot threes. You're allowed to do that, okay? So if there's somebody guarding you and you on that muscle milk and he's not, do what you got to do, Kevin, and that's what he did last night. All right, one more segment with the guys. This Kings Roundtable, Brenden, Nunes, Frankie, Cartoscelli. We take a trip around the NBA get their thoughts on the hot starts from the former Kings players, specifically one, if I might add. And we close up the initial thoughts on the start of the season for the Sacramento Kings. Stiles Watkins, Sactown Sports. This is what everybody thinks I'm doing at these roundtables. Misery business.
Dude, Paramore.
I say one thing. Oh, yeah, I love Paramore.
Do you?
So does Steph.
Can
I say one thing about the bench, and these guys, when the mics come off, what are you doing, man? Brenden, I know you.
I don't know why you're looking at me.
Because you have
it
my
hasn't
back.
been me.
Yeah,
Yes.
you have my back.
Can I share something?
Okay,
This Paramore's on.
sure.
It reminds me and my wonderful wife, my sister and her boyfriend. We were
I think I've
watching.
heard you use that term yet.
It's crazy. It's still
W word.
getting
Yeah.
used to it.
Yeah, that thing's shiny too.
Dubs.
It is.
Nation.
We were watching over. We're watching over the Twilight movies.
Okay.
I've never seen them.
Uh-huh.
They're horrible.
Not great.
Is there a lot of Paramore in those?
Yeah.
There
I
is.
think there's the soundtrack.
It's nostalgic and it's nice, but the movies are so bad.
They're not good.
And I'm just wondering if you guys have seen them because
Yes.
I feel
all
like
of
I'm
them multiple
crazy.
times.
And
Yeah.
one of them, the plot is he just proposes.
Yes.
That whole movie happens
Yeah.
where she's like with
Yeah.
Taylor Lautner.
Yeah.
And then at the end he proposes again.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Movie's over.
Yeah. It's a great film.
2 hours.
No, some movies don't age well.
They play baseball at a point. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yes,
iconic.
And that's why I was in.
Yeah, yeah.
Werewolf
It's really
baseball.
a baseball movie.
Yeah.
You know?
My three favorite
was
baseball
crazy.
movies, okay? Sandlot, Mr. 3000,
Twilight.
and Twilight.
Mr. 3000 is great.
There you go. Rex Pennebaker. All right. R.I.P. Bernie Mac.
Is that his name in that movie?
That's the young gun coming after Bernie Mac.
That's
All right.
you.
That is me. Okay, let's round out the round table here, guys, and take a trip around the league. And we were having this conversation off air, so let's take it on air. Look, as I struggle with this, Chris, was that last week when people got mad at me about the Buddy Hield stuff?
I believe so. I can't keep track.
So both of you, and I think a lot of Kings Nation, and I believe Kyle was in for this show. But the whole thing is that, hey, the better Buddy plays now, it's going to be even funnier when that shoe drops. He had a dagger 3 as the Warriors had a nice comeback against the Celtics. No Jaylen Brown, but the Warriors get it done, and that's really their first.
Pods.
No pods.
Come on.
He
No
was
D'Anthony
sick as
Melton.
well.
What an even swap.
I would say
It
so.
is.
Hey,
D'Anthony Melton too.
and D'Anthony Melton.
Come
Hey,
on.
they wouldn't give up pods or Kuminga for
Come on.
Paul George. So
They
you.
only could play 10 guys, not 12 that night.
that's
Yeah.
right. Buddy Hield, what are your initial thoughts on Buddy? Do you think things are going to go squirrely, or does it seem like I kind of feel this could be another Warriors reclamation project?
So you think that Buddy Hield is going to be 6th man of the year?
I did not say that.
Okay.
But he didn't say no.
But I'm asking you, right? I'm asking you
No,
right
no.
now.
I'm not saying Buddy's going to be 6th man of the
Okay.
year, but
Because he's gonna start.
I'm saying I don't know if the shoe that a lot of Kings fans think is going to drop will drop this season.
And to be completely fair, and you know, we're having fun, but maybe it won't. Like, there's a possibility it won't, because it's a new situation. We've seen players, like you said, turn it around, you know, going on to greener pastures, playing for winning environments. Steve Kerr is someone who obviously has been at the helm of, you know, a dynasty. Stephen Curry, the greatest shooter of all time. I mean, Draymond Green, who can tell players where to be and help orchestrate things. Yeah, I think
Slow-mo.
I think Buddy Hield truly is an ideal fit for them. But I do think that what we're seeing right now, he's shooting 50% from 3. Like, it's not sustainable. And the turnovers we've seen, they will happen. And the defense is still the defense. But as a shot maker and from the offensive standpoint, he might end the year averaging 18, 19 points per game. That's very possible. But I don't know if it's going to be all, you know, sunflowers and rainbows. There's going to be some lumps they're going to have to take with it as well. We've seen in every stop for the Buddy Hield experience that he can score 35 and just light it up. And then
the cycle.
And then we saw the first time the Kings played against Buddy Hield in Indiana. I think he was having a pretty good game. Then he dropped the ball inexplicably
That's
off
right.
his foot, and the Kings won by 1 point. So there will be good and bad, but
People don't forget.
there's no denying Buddy Hield has been a great fit for the Warriors so far.
Chris?
My thoughts are well documented. I want to hear what Brenden has to say.
I mean, I think that we probably agree. I think this is slowing down for sure. I think that we are until it is proven that this cycle is not just going to happen again, I choose to believe it's going to be honest.
That's fair.
We saw it happen pretty quickly in Indiana. I do think that he will have he averaged 12 points last year. Like, he's going to be higher than that, obviously. I do think that the player movement and obviously elite shooting that he has fits well with the Warriors, but they're also big on ball movement, and he has moments he's not the greatest at that. Like, it's not a coincidence that everybody mentions dribbling the ball off your foot when we talk about Buddy Hield, which I think kind of says a lot about a guy. Sorry to be mean. And so I think that Draymond Green is going to have a moment. One of the smartest players that there is. He's probably going to have a moment where he yells at Buddy for doing something crazy, and it's like, how does Buddy respond to that?
I'm sorry to laugh. That's going to be crazy when that happens.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
Honestly, what I think it is right now is that if you really boil, and I know that the bench has played really well for the Warriors, but if you look at how some of these games have gone, it's been Buddy who's kind of led the charge. So right now, to your point, Brenden, there's no point in him passing it because nobody else is hitting. If Buddy cools off, it's strength in numbers until the numbers don't have strength, right? And I think right now, Buddy's kind of leading it, and all he has to do is shoot. If Buddy gets cold, I think we're going to see that maybe they might not. I think that defense is going to travel. I think that defense is going to track, but I think I'm not necessarily convinced offensively that the Warriors are the juggernaut that they look like right now. Okay, no more Warriors before I get in trouble. Suns 7-1. Are we digging it? I just read off some numbers about their usage. I know Chris, again, well documented. Devin Booker, who's not older, but Kevin Durant, who is. Both of them doing the Team USA thing. They never really had an off season. Do we think the Suns are not gonna be 81-1, but do we see the Suns getting Tyus Jones being in that top 3 conversation throughout the season?
I think so. I mean, I was on record before the year started saying that I think that team is probably going to make it out of the Western Conference Finals. I think they have that level of talent. I did always preface it with I'm also a guy that believed in the Clippers for way longer than I clearly should have.
And which era of the Clippers? Lob City or
no, this like new. Kawhi
this
PG.
Okay.
Every Kawhi PG year, I was like, this could still be the year.
Yeah, if they can figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, I just can't overlook a certain level of talent, and I feel like Phoenix has that. I mean, Kevin Durant, still every time you watch him play, he just is Kevin Durant. It's a crazy, ridiculous fadeaway over the top of a guy, and it looks like nothing, I think getting Tyus Jones, getting Monte Morris, Ryan Dunn has been really big for them in the draft. Royce O'Neal is playing well. You mentioned Grayson Allen almost like being their Malik earlier, which I think is fairly accurate. Like, they have everything, and I think Budenholzer's fit in well there. I think they're legit. I think they're right there. Them and OKC have been insane to start the year.
Yeah, they also were my pick to come out of the West this year. It just seems like it's going to be, if they're healthy. I mean, it just seems like if they're healthy, they're going to be there. Like Denver's going to be in the mix. OKC's look great, but I think that the experience and the talent that Phoenix has, and the guys that took the minimum deals and to kind of round out their bench. And is it a great bench? No, but they have some pretty impactful players that the Kings could use. A Tyus Jones right now off the bench. The Kings could use a Royce O'Neal, who they were tied to last year. I mean, these are some players that maybe aren't complete difference makers. They're going to lead into a championship on their own, but they're players that are as complementary pieces. Very good. But I think that Phoenix, OKC, Denver, those are the teams I kind of think will still be there, Minnesota. But hey, man, Kings.
I'm telling you,
my opinion of the Kings, I think coming into the season, I thought they were going to be in the 6-7 range. I feel like they're more in that kind of 5 spot. I'm feeling the number 5. I don't know why. I'm just looking at number 5.
De'Aaron Fox.
I'm eyeing the number 5 spot. Yeah.
You guys going to get the new shoes? De'Aaron Fox's new shoes?
Not after you showed me that commercial.
Yeah, the commercial killed it for me. I'm not going to lie.
And I don't think he made it, to be fair. I don't think that's...
There's no way.
But he did have to green light it. No.
Yeah. I don't think that De'Aaron calls Steph Curry chef. Yeah. I don't think he calls him chef.
Yeah.
That's
during the break, go check out the De'Aaron Fox commercial. Has a release date for his shoes. Real quick, guys, 30 seconds or less. Lakers recent fall off. Who are the Lakers? Frankie first.
Who are they? Like, where are they going to be?
Yeah.
They'll finish top 8. I think I do believe if they stay healthy. I keep saying if they stay healthy, but I mean LeBron, AD. I think JJ Redick's done a good job with kind of crafting this team, and obviously a basketball mind. I don't see any way that they fall out of the top 8, in my opinion.
Brenden?
I think the same. I think they're just relying on the oldest guy in the league and a very I guess, frail center. When he's healthy, they're great and they have good pieces, but they're going to be inconsistent with that.
But he wants to be a power forward. All right, Frankie, Cartoscelli, Brenden, Nunes, Kings Roundtable, part 1 of a lot of parts throughout this season. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. We will talk to you soon. On the other side, we get into some Niners. Debo, on his pneumonia situation, also thought he might be traded. And The Athletic gives the Niners a grade at the trade deadline. We'll tell you what it is when we return. Stiles and Watkins, Sactown Sports.